I was there that morning. Most people weren't, so they only know the story from what got whispered around Renholt afterward. But I stood maybe 30 feet away, holding a rake I'd forgotten I was even holding. So let me tell you how it really happened. It was a cold Tuesday in the palace courtyard. October, I think. That kind of morning where the fog sits low on the stone and doesn't lift until noon. I'd worked the palace grounds for 11 years by then. Cutting hedges, sweeping paths, nothing important. Nobody notices the man with the rake, which is exactly why I saw what I saw. Princess Elira was 9 years old. Small for her age, quiet, always watching things the way children watch when the grown-ups think they're not listening. Her mother, the old queen, had passed 2 winters before, and after that, the palace felt colder in a way the weather couldn't explain. That morning, a black car was parked near the West Arch, waiting to take the princess to her lessons across the city. The engine wasn't running yet. The driver had stepped away for something, and Elira, being 9, climbed into the back seat early on her own to wait. I remember she was humming some little tune. I could hear it faint across the courtyard. Then the humming stopped. I didn't think much of it at first. Kids go quiet all the time, but something about the way she went still made me look up. She wasn't looking out the window anymore. She was bent down, reaching under the seat in front of her, the way you do when you've dropped a coin. Only she didn't come back up right away. When she finally sat up, she was holding something. A folder, thin, cream-colored, tied with a bit of string. The kind of thing that shouldn't be under the seat of a child's car. And she just sat there staring at it, and I watched her face change. She was too young to fully understand it, but she was old enough to know it didn't belong there. That's the thing about children. They can't always name what's wrong, but they feel it. Standing near the arch was Corporal Aldous Vane, guard of the West Gate. Big man, straight back, the sort who'd stand in the rain for 6 hours and never shift his weight. I'd known Vane for years in the way you know someone you nod to but never really talk to. Loyal to the crown. That was the word people used for him. Loyal. Elira knocked on the car window, soft, then harder. Vane broke posture. Guards aren't supposed to do that. But he did. He walked over, opened the door, and crouched down to her level, and I saw her hold the folder out to him with both hands like it was something hot. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw him take it, I saw him open it, and I saw his face go from calm to something else entirely. Now I have to back up and tell you about someone else, because none of this makes sense without her. Queen Dowager Seraphine, the late king's second wife. She'd married into Renholt years before, and after the old queen, Elira's mother, died, Seraphine had quietly moved into the center of everything. Ran the household, managed the accounts, decided who came and went. She was never cruel in a way you could point at. She was worse than that. She was smooth. She wore her grief like a coat she could take off when the room emptied. I'd seen it. Once, through a window, I watched her console a weeping courtier, dabbing her own eyes, and the moment the door shut, she checked her reflection and adjusted her collar and walked off like nothing had happened. I never forgot that. A person who can turn feeling on and off like a tap is a person you should watch. And the whole palace had a quiet suspicion, one nobody dared say out loud, that the accounts didn't add up. That money meant for the old queen's charities, for the children's homes she'd loved, had been going somewhere it shouldn't. But suspicion isn't proof, and nobody wanted to be the one who accused the Queen Dowager of anything. Now you understand what was in that folder. Vane read it there in the fog, page after page, ledgers, signatures, transfers, a trail written in someone's careful hand, hidden under the seat of the princess's own car, because who would ever think to search there? Who suspects a child? I watched him close the folder. I watched him look at Elira, and then I watched him do the thing that changed everything. Seraphine had just stepped out onto the courtyard steps. She did this every morning, surveying the grounds like she owned the sky itself. She was calling out to a servant about something. Her voice carried the way it always did, expecting to be obeyed. Vane stood up. He tucked the folder under his arm, and instead of taking it inside quietly, instead of handing it up the chain the way a careful man protects himself, he walked straight across the courtyard toward the steps. I remember thinking, Aldous, don't. Whatever this is, you're a Westgate guard. She'll crush you. She'll have you gone by supper. He kept walking. The whole courtyard seemed to notice at once. A couple of other guards near the fountain went stiff. A maid froze with a basket on her hip. Even the fog seemed to hold still. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked up at her, and in a voice that wasn't loud but was steady enough to reach every stone in that yard, he said, "Your Grace, the princess found something in her car this morning. I think you already know what it is." Seraphine's smile didn't move, but her eyes did. For a moment, nobody breathed. She recovered fast, I'll give her that. She laughed, light, dismissive, the laugh of a woman brushing lint off her sleeve. She said something about the child's imagination, about how a 9-year-old finding papers was hardly a matter for a gate guard. She told him to hand over whatever it was and return to his post. And here's the moment I'll remember until I die. Vane didn't move. He held the folder tighter, and he said, "With respect, Your Grace, these were meant for the children's homes, Her late Majesty's homes. I served under Her Majesty for 9 years. I know her signature, and it isn't on the last 4 pages." The courtyard went so quiet, I could hear the flag rope tapping against the pole. You see, that was the thing nobody had understood about Seraphine's plan. She'd been so clever. Hide the evidence where no one searches a child's car. Trust that if it's ever found, a frightened servant would bring it straight to her, and it would simply vanish. Her whole scheme depended on everyone in that palace being too afraid to do exactly what Vane had just done. She'd counted on fear. She hadn't counted on one man who cared more about a dead queen's promise than his own job. Seraphine's voice dropped then. Cold now, the warmth gone, and she said quietly, "Corporal, think very carefully about your next words." And little Elira, 9 years old, standing by the car, spoke up. Small voice. Shaking, she said, "Mama helped those children. I remember she took me there." That was it. That was all it took. A child's memory out loud in front of everyone. Because now it wasn't one guard's word against a queen. It was a guard and a princess and a folder full of signatures and 40 people in a courtyard who had all seen and heard the same thing. You can silence one person. You can't silence a morning. The steward came out. Then the chamberlain. The folder passed from Vane's hands into official ones, and Seraphine, I watched her understand in real time that it was over. Not with a scream, not with tears, just a slow settling in her shoulders, the look of someone who's played a long game and lost it in the space of 2 minutes to the one variable she never accounted for: decency. She was gone from the palace within the month. The charities got what was owed and more. And Corporal Vane, well, some of the older courtiers muttered that he'd overstepped, that a guard should never confront royalty in the open like that. But the little princess didn't think so. Years later, when Elira was grown and it was her name on the crown, the first thing she did was appoint Aldous Vane as head of her personal guard. He was old by then, gray, slower on his feet, and when someone asked her at the ceremony why she'd chosen a simple gate guard for such an honor, she said something I've never forgotten. She said, "Because when I was 9 years old and everyone else in this palace looked away, he was the only one who looked at me, and then did something about it." I still work these grounds. Older now, slower too, same as him. And every morning when I pass that west arch where the car was parked, I think the same quiet thing. Loyalty isn't standing still and saying nothing. Real loyalty is knowing when to break your posture, step off your mark, and speak, even when it costs you everything. That's the difference between a man who guards a gate and a man who guards what's right.